My guest today has spent decades helping people navigate one of life's most difficult decisions. Dr. Hobbs,
How are you?
welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank
What first drew you to your work?
when I was in a summer camp, working a summer camp, I was working with children, and, I was out the things that they were doing. And, I started saying, I want to be, something where I can help them and, and the choices that they make. So personal choices, career choices, things like that. And so, and I went, of course, I went to college and stuff to really, hone on that and see if what I can do with that. So I became a counselor, and first I became a counselor for I forget the name, a youth counselor. That's what I want to say. And then from there, went up, and then I went to be a counselor for schools and stuff. So from there, I did that, and from there, I went on to get my doctorate, of course, in cultural psychology and started to really, work on some of the things I wanted to do with regards to mental health and working with young people, also working with older people too. So
And you grew up in Queens, so let's backtrack a little bit. How did growing up shape you as a person and who you became? Tell me a little bit about you growing up. Which neighborhoods were you born?
okay.
A true New Yorker here and true Queensians.
Yes. So I started in Astoria and I went to Jamaica and East Elmhurst. I'm gonna back up, but I'm gonna just give it to different places. Corona. So when I talked about, East Astoria first, that was when I was actually living in and so I was working in, I can say, in the projects over there, and went from there. We went, my family, to Jamaica, where I grew up in Rochdale a little bit, dad, then my parents separated. Then Corona, I'm sorry, East Elmhurst first, and lived with my grandmother, my aunt. And then we finally moved and settled in Left Rock City, Sherwood Village, and so places I was actually going to. And so, but really, my growing up was really in the East Elmhurst and Corona area, which is Left Rack City, Sherwood Village. And so I was just, was really where I guess my beginnings began. So
And at high school, did you immediately go into studying for mental health counselor? How did that trajectory form?
I wanted to be in medicine, actually. And then I was taking a couple classes. I was like, I don't know if I can really do, but I really wanted to work with children. And so the other part was that I wanted to work. I did psychology, and I want to do more of this. And so I studied more. And well, I went to York College, so again in Queens, right? So I studied more about psychology and what does that mean, and how does that how does that come off, and what did that what do I do with that? And so from there, I went to get my master's at LIU, which is in Brooklyn, and became a guidance counselor there before going off to California to get my doctorate.
And so you were also guidance counselor for District 27?
District 75.
District 75.
Yeah,
Yes. Tell me about this. Yes.
that's all program. So they have five, in five boroughs and stuff. And so starting off there, I started in the Bronx and working with special needs children in there. And then I took a break to go to California and came back and, and still worked as a guidance counselor, but I worked in Manhattan School for Development. So I did about altogether about 26 years of doing that and working with young people.
When did you realize this is it? This is my career. This is what I want to do. This is my life's work.
Probably say when I guess my second or third year of a guidance counselor, and I said, this is expected, but it was in a way because I was working with the young people and going over the careers, but also personal issues and things like that. So I did that, and I found it rewarding in a way. So from I did about 5 years, like I said, in the Bronx, and then, went to California to get my doctorate and then come too as well. Yeah.
What something that adults misunderstand about mental health and the struggles that young people experience?
I think we do. I think when you want to find out what young people are going through, you have to ask them. And I think for us, as adults, we want to say, oh, this is what's wrong with them. This, you're like, well, if you want to be sure, why don't you just ask them? And so, ask, do that. Ask them about, what they want to do, who they are, why did they, how I should say, how did they come to be where they are in trying to, navigate this world and also being in special education. So it carries a stigma behind it because it's like, they can't do this or they can't do that. It's like it's not, when you work with them, you realize it's like they can do a lot more than people expect them to do.
And there are nowadays a lot more conversations about mental health than before. Do you still think there's stigma or it's slowly changing?
Yeah, I think it's really stigmas with, I want to say, with young people of color, but also with men. So, talking about mental health and people say, oh, well, they're crazy or we're not supposed to get help. And so it's like, myself and, just going through therapy myself and saying, I've done this and it's nothing we should be ashamed of. And I think people, I think some people are growing into it, and there still needs to be more work.
So when you used to go to therapy, were you telling people at that time or you kept it to yourself?
At first, I kept it to myself, right? And then I said, "Why am I doing that? If I'm giving therapy, why let people know that I'm getting therapy? I'm working on myself. We work on ourselves physically and stuff like that, or mentally. So, yeah,
Yes, and do you find it, at least my observation is like that, and I'm not a professional, but there's certain groups of people like cultural. I'm Bulgarian, and there's such a stigma in Bulgaria about being on therapy, mental health. You're absolutely doing crazy if you go to therapy. And I study acting. Our teacher here in the States, and our teacher said that it was one of the assignments to go to therapy in order to find yourself, to get in touch with your emotions and feelings, and that helps you as an actor. And I really liked the way it just the sessions went, and I was telling friends of mine and everyone, even Bulgarian people, mostly at that time. So I remember the reactions were, "Really? But do you have problems?" I think we all have problems, but just for me, it was fascinating to therapy for me, what is to find out how the brain works. Like a professional knows, okay, patterns, how the brain works, or from your experience with other people that you talk to. So it's fascinating to hear professionals say it, but I still see in our community, in my community, there's a taboo and a
yeah,
stigma.
yeah.
Do you find it that here with, like you mentioned, young men of color, but also older men? Is it still the same way? And
Yeah, it is. I think it's a slow progress. It will take time because, I think for me it's like I think that, you know, young men of color, older men of color, and, what we've been through with regards to doctors and just thinking about, distrust of the system and the medical system and the mental health, and then saying, oh, well, we can handle these things on our own because, we got this. And I'm like, we have this, I guess, thing about we can handle this, we can handle anything. And this could be true, and it is true, but also, why not get help mentally if you need to? People get help. We all get help when, like I said, our leg is broke or something like that, or, physically, but mentally, that's something that we're like, well, we can handle this. We're strong. We can do, they can man up and all these different things. It's like, I
how do
tell
you
people,
talk to them? How do you explain to them? What is one way that you can explain to them that they would change their minds?
I would say, just about getting better at what you're doing. And so you get better physically, but what about mentally? It's a lot of things that are going on in the world that we want to say, how do I handle this? And we might know and how to handle, but at the same time, why not ask someone else? It doesn't have to be a professional, but if a friend or somebody like that that you can go to, a trusted person that you can go to and say, how can I handle relationships, or how can I, handle business decisions, or, other personal issues and professional issues that, and you don't have to go and ask for help on every little you do, but there might be times that you're like, well, maybe I need somebody that, I can just talk to, just working at the church, and what are some of the things that, because we have a mental health practice there as well. So we talk about, from them is that, what are some of the things that you want to do? And I'd say that we have, coming to me than men and men of color. And so I think I have maybe one or two, maybe three men of color, and the rest are women of different ages and stuff like that. So it's just, it kind of like just boggles the mind about it. And but I understand why men of color want to do things on their own. Like I said,
Why? Is it this term, toxic masculinity, is that related to? Can you explain that term to me?
so just to be clear is that I think because of the distrust of the system as a whole, just going back and, and finding therapists who can, understands if you've gone through. And so, and that's another reason, different reasons because of that. And, that's why I say, I'm a therapist, but I get therapy, you know, and, I tell, other people, it's okay to do that, you know, and now you're seeing like some athletes coming out too and saying, I get therapy too. And, nobody's shaming them for that.
Mm.
And so, it's one of those things that we probably have to really just keep working on.
And I know at the church,
Yeah.
those services are free,
Yes.
but when people don't have access to that, do you think barrier for people to seek help?
Yes.
And has that
Money.
changed after the pandemic? I know the co-payments are less in some of the insurance plans for mental health.
It has, and, you know, some free sessions at the facility, at First Baptist, but also, the cost does, play a factor. Some people who who want it or may need it. And so, it's kind of hard to navigate something if you don't have the money to do it. And so, looking at, you know, places like at the church that I go to, but also the other facilities too. So I'm not the only therapist who provides free therapy. So there are others, and we work with Northwell to get these services out to people. And like we said, it's free. So, we want to continue to do stuff like that.
And you work with young people. Is it easier to convince, for lack of a better word, young people to talk to a therapist than older people?
I want to say, I think yeah, I think they want to talk to people.
They're more open.
Yeah, because when I was working in the school system, and they say they don't have to go, but they will go, and they want to figure out how to do certain things, or how to think form, and so they want to have somebody to talk to. And, it's not always like deep personal stuff. It's just like, how how do I ask a girl out?
Right.
something like that. So
Most important question for a teenager.
I
No,
wish I had that when I was growing up, but yeah, yeah,
safe space for them to open up because vulnerability. I remember when I went to therapy back then, it was very difficult because in my culture we don't really share with more of a vulnerability. It's very hard to share with a stranger in the beginning and to talk about it.
yeah. I think that's the other piece is that if you can find a therapist with similar cultural backgrounds, that helps too. So
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about
okay.
choosing a therapist because I know a lot of people say, well, you have to choose your therapist, interview your therapist, and not just go to anyone. Talk to me about that, the importance of that.
I think that's very important. If a therapist doesn't really have, they can have the book knowledge, but what we call but if they're not comfortable or able to help you, culturally, because they haven't experienced enough of that, you can say, this is not the person for me and go to somebody else. It's okay. I don't think oh, well, they can't come, they can't, be with me because of, X, Y, and Z or, culturally, but it's okay. A therapist not gonna get mad at you. They might even find you somebody that you might, feel better comfortable with. And so I think that that lends to the therapy and lends to getting help and support that people need.
So, besides the cultural similarities, what are other criteria people should look for?
Well, of course, the money,
Right.
right? The culture, the money, and I'd say this is that, you know, having somebody that you feel comfortable with,
Okay.
and that's the biggest key, just that comfortability. And what's interesting is that I've seen seniors than I think anybody else. A few young adults, but I get more seniors. So and I think it's good in the sense that you wouldn't think because they've been through more years, but they're also some of them are willing to open up as well.
When did you start the program church? And I know that's one of the first mental health programs in Queen Church.
Yes,
It connected with Northwell, right? Health.
yes, and
And how did it grow? How many people you had in the beginning and now?
right. So we started about 2 years ago. And so it's still fresh, it's still new, but the people who are providing the therapy are not fresh and having that piece where you as a therapist you don't feel like you're alone because now you have this industry, this company, this organization, Northwell, saying, if if you as a therapist can't provide, have somebody else do therapy or do something else for them that they need. So it's just the mental health piece that we do at First Baptist is say, and it's just we continue to do this more and more.
How many people you had in the beginning and versus now?
So I've started with about maybe 2 or 3 people. We're up to like 28, 29 people right
That's
now.
wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and no, I think every day it seems to grow. And like I said, we have therapy at First Baptist, but we'll have a facility in Harlem and also in Long Island too. And so it's not just, oh, just come all the First Baptist because we can't handle everybody, but we do have room for that. And now I've gotten help for more people because is that I can't serve everybody, especially people at the church, because I know them. And so that's the difficulty. So when they got somebody to help me, the people, some people at the church will go to them. And that way, I'm still their friend because as a therapist, you don't want to have a friend, I want to say a a friendship that's close, we be like, okay, now I know your stuff, but I'm looking at you differently. It's not a comfortable situation. I tell them it's like I'm your friend, and I want to be your friend, and I value that, and I take great importance in having that. And so having somebody who is also a therapist too, who like they don't know the people that and they don't go to that church, but they come in to help out with the people at the church.
People that come to the program, do they have to be members of First Church?
No,
No.
no, not at all. I get people from different places in Queens, surrounding areas in Queens, like, the Bronx and Brooklyn. And also, even though we're based in Elmhurst, it could be outside of East Elmhurst. So, you have Astoria, you have Woodside, you have Corona, Flushing. You have all these different places that people come from to get therapy as well.
And I know a lot of people now use ChatGPT to be their therapist in the pocket. Can we talk about AI in therapy?
Yes,
I'm guilty of that. It's very accessible.
it is accessible.
Is it useful at some point? Is it not useful?
It's useful at some point, but then it's sometimes if people overuse it, and people who know ChatGPT know that they use your algorithms. So some things that a therapist might not say or say, they'll be like it's gonna always once you keep using it, it's gonna use your algorithms to say, oh yeah, that's right, or this is a but like could be, but
Meaning agree with you because it has the tendency to agree with you.
yeah, and so it's not always good in that respects. I mean, use it, but you have to be careful how you use it.
Do you see changing that sphere? Are there a lot of are there therapists that might be out of work because of AI?
Mm,
Or you never see that?
no, no, not at all. I think it's a good tool, and but if you're not aware of it, people can really get caught up in it and saying, my therapist is ChatGPT. Yeah, like, well, it shouldn't be ChatGPT because it's gonna, at some point it will agree with you on everything you say. And so you put around that. And, also to get a human side of things. And that's where a therapist will come in and be like, oh, to, talk about how to form or how to do things, than what ChatGPT says.
Definitely. So you wrote a book. Let's talk about the book.
Oh yeah, okay.
And
Brother
Brother in Silence.
yes. When silence and liberation begins.
Yes.
Right.
Why did you write the book? And when did you start writing it? What did you write it?
Oh, okay. I'll say, this was sometime last year. And, going back to Northwell, we had a retreat with just the council. So it was a small group. And one of the people that came in just asked, like, if you was to write this book, and it was just something I was just thinking about. It's like, if you was to write a book or, write an article or something like that, what would you want to really touch on? And then I thought about it and I said, men of color in getting therapy. So I know we talked about that, but that was something that really stuck with me. And the person, there said, you should do that because there's not a lot of information about that. And so I was like, you know what? And so when I was, I guess, I was so excited. I just really went home and just really just thought about it, and then I started writing, and it just really came, easy for me to do that. And so, just that alone, just I guess it was like kind of like therapy for me. And why do I want it? And why young people or young people of color or the men of color, and why are they resistant to that? And what is the reason for that? And so, in writing the book, I went back to just thinking about it. I said, oh, went back to slavery and how, men of color were treated and, why certain things that we didn't get to do because we were want to say silent because, if we spoke out, there would be repercussions for that. And how it grew into, different different areas such as, you know, thinking about Jim Crow and what does that mean and going from there to discrimination and things of that nature. And it grew in saying, things where we were silent and it really wasn't our fault at the same time. And going from there and saying, we should get there because of those things as well. And so that made me just write this book.
Would you say that is what is called generational trauma, or generational trauma is something?
Yeah, trauma. That's what I used in the book too,
Yeah.
generational trauma. And so yeah, that was a big piece. And said, it wasn't something that was our fault or anything like that. It was just, placed on us and we didn't, go along with it. Otherwise we would, things would happen. Yeah.
Interviewing, speaking to a lot of people due to your work in the book, what would you is the biggest challenge of this generation now, these current times? What are people struggling the most with?
It's interesting. I laugh about that because, because we talked about social media, right? And chat GPT. And, one of the things that we had to do for Lent this time, which was last week, is that we had to stay off of social media for a week. And so people were like, I don't know about this is older and younger people too, but I think the younger people are like social media use, different mediums as such, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all these, different areas of social use that for a week. So that was a big thing. And it's still a big thing. And so, how do you navigate that and not be able to speak to friends, from different places where when we didn't have social media, we didn't have these people that we speak to from different places, just our immediate people that were in our eyesight. And, so I would say social media plays a big part in this. And that's what we have to really think about that. Not to say that we should get away from social media. That's not it at all. But how do we social media and having a life outside of social media?
You say that social media contributes to the loneliness epidemic, and how can we get back to that human connection? I know church is one of these. What are some other ways?
And so that was something I also put is for men of color is that having these circles that we go to. And I say, church was one, but also said that, barbershops, hair salons, like these are places that, culturally that people talked about different things. So it wasn't like, you're going to a barber and just, or a hair salon and just getting your hair done and that's it. There was also dialogue in that as well about different things. So yeah.
And okay, that is great. I've never barbershops, but that's great. So I guess also with women, when we go to get our nails done, we do talk with nail artists or whatever you call it, the manicurist. And it's sort of like therapy.
Yeah.
If you go to the same one, sometimes they know a lot about you.
Absolutely. So, it's, these are just different places that you can just, like it's just a church, but also barbershops, but you also have like friend groups and stuff like that that you can also talk to as well and stuff and get away from social media and, just have a genuine conversation with and really share some things with.
And I think a lot of countries started implementing this social media, places where you would go and you'll be off social media and just read a book and connect with people. But I think, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, we have to be conscious because we're so conditioned, especially after we make, to keep to ourselves, especially working from home and social media. So if we don't make a conscious effort, at least for me, it was like that. And I'm a social person.
Yeah.
Conscious effort to go in friends and organize sometimes or be off social media, it's just not going to happen. So do you see that trend with other people? Do you tell them that they have to be consciously going out and connecting with people?
Yeah, because you brought up something important after the pandemic, or even
Mm.
when we were in the
Yeah.
pandemic. Of course, it was a lot of isolation, and social media really got big, I guess you want to say, and it didn't really help us, with our mental health because we had this sort of isolated, and and a lot of things happened that shouldn't have happened. As far as seems like more people were isolating themselves even after the pandemic. And so it was hard to bring people back. Like we were talking about, people should go back to work. And so, but having remote time is good. The right, say that, it's not good. It helped, but it also hindered too as well. It taught us, that, you know, we can still work and be at home, but being at home means that it's isolation, and the negative part of it is like, you have this time to yourself, but what else are you doing with that time? You can have work and and be at home and be comfortable and good with that, but also being at home, are you getting out now? Work is over. No, I'm gonna just stay in the house now. I was
Yeah.
like, no, you should want to do something, and so it has to be that balance between the two.
I want to know how many hours you spent on social media. How many hours on social media is mentally appropriate?
Oh, it is. I like social media, and I think for the past year and a half, I've been trying to neutralize it somewhat, and so I would say, and it gives you a readout, so it's about 3 to 4 hours a day.
Okay, that seems a lot,
Yeah, it does, right?
right? It
And
adds up. We don't realize it, but it adds up. After when I check the metrics,
yeah.
like, did I really spend that much?
So do so is it all social media? No, there's other things that I do with my phone as well. And so, it talks about, it doesn't just say social media. It just says just so many hours you spent on the phone.
On the screen, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the screen, right? So, it could, be that, I have, is it because I'm talking to people on the phone? Is it because I'm looking up stuff that I wanna order, stuff like that, and, is it social media? Of course, there's some of that too as well, and, I have emails and, just the screen time is like, a lot of different things go into that screen time.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you think about the future, what gives you hope as far as mental health in our communities?
The hope would the hope is that people, I think, are opening their eyes to more, just getting help in general. I think, people are seeing, and I think probably because of the pandemic. And like I said, it opened eyes for us. It's like, this was good, but there was a bad side that we're starting to recognize now. And like the isolation. No, we, you know, we need to do something about that and the mental health piece of that. And so, you know, people are starting to say, want to get out more, but also be cognizant of my mental health I'm spending at home. And so that I think is the whole part, is that people are realizing that it's good to be at home, but it's also good to be out too. So having and striking that balance, and I think we're on the verge of getting that. You know, some do it better than others, but it's still helps to realize that we need to do this more.
And there's a question that I always ask my guests in the end. It's not mental health related, but if someone wanted to experience Queens in a way you do, since you are born and raised in Queens, through community, culture, or just something meaningful, where would you send them? You tell them to go?
Oh boy.
What a few places.
You know, I'm not gonna plug the places, but there, just in East Elmhurst, Corona, Story, the food places are good. And, if you're looking for different places, with food and stuff, I would say, those not to I don't want to plug a particular place, but there are places that, have good dining and stuff. And also for older people, the different recreational activities that are available in East Elmhurst and Corona and Astoria. So yeah,
Great. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
thank you for having.
And we didn't talk about the podcast, but you also have a
Oh
podcast
yeah,
that you do, monthly podcasts.
yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, the podcast is about different things dealing with mental health, and just in January, I had a woman by the name of Sayeda Dunstan who works at Elm Corps, and she's the I want to say CEO. I was going to say director. She's more than that. So she's the CEO of Elm Corps. And so Elm Corps is for senior citizens and for young adults. So they do a lot of different activities there. In February, we talked about relationships and how to repair, when things sometimes go awry. And, we think that, a rupture in your relationship, that it's over. And it's, those are the times that you're like, yeah, we have ruptures, but we're able to, if both people are willing, they're able to work out those things. And for March this month is Women's History Month. And so have the associate pastor church coming in to talk about, some of the things that, women are doing, and how they you know people tend to lean on them for certain things, but where do they go to put those heavy burdens down? Who do they go to, and things like that? So that's what's coming up for the end of March. So yeah,
Great. Thank you so much for being guest today.
thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.